New Buddhaware Dhamma Talks. Jeff Hunt presents a talk on some aspect of the Buddha's teaching.
People often ask me, oh, I hear you are a Buddhist or you're into Buddhism. And I think that, makes it sound like a fashion of some sort. You're into it. And they want to know, why, basically, and, where is that leading to you? Where does that take you? So for somebody that knows nothing about it, I'll always say, well, it takes you to greater wisdom, compassion, and peace. And that's not just a phrase that, we repeat. It is, in a way, a summary of the teaching. So I'd just like to say something about that. What do we mean by wisdom, compassion, and peace? And how are they related? Are they just three things that we picked out of the air that don't really fit together? They do fit together. They go hand in hand. We could start with peace. The first noble truth of the Buddha is that we human beings suffer. And it isn't just because things happen to us. His teaching is a little deeper than that, but I'll use a slang expression. What he really means is that we are sufferheads, meaning that we tend to generate our own suffering and kind of then, sob about it, complain about it, blame others for it, and then get into a cycle, in which we go on multiplying our own suffering. So the first noble truth is really, I am a sufferhead. Now, that sounds a bit bleak, doesn't it? But you see, actually, it's the teaching on peace, because the other side of the coin is peace. But if you turn the coin over, what he's saying is, how do we understand that, and how do we subdue that suffering, or attenuate that suffering? In other words, how do we move towards peace? So he's not actually interested in suffering, he's interested in peace, or non-suffering. And if there's one thing that the Buddha taught, it was peace. So we need to understand what he meant by peace. Peace isn't it isn't only the absence of conflict or arguments or disappointment. It is all those things, but it is something much more positive than that. Something which has the positive aspect of generosity, gratitude, cooperation, harmony. All those positives are about peace, understanding, and this is where compassion and wisdom come in, because peace is impossible without compassion and wisdom. So now the Buddha sees peace, I think, on different levels. If you've had a hard week or a hard year, at work, you've been stressed out and you'd like to take a break, so you think of going down to the coast, and not just going out for a meal or taking a holiday. I think we associate those things in our minds with peace. Just want some peace, just want some peace and quiet. I've had enough stress. And, the Buddha understands that. And he thinks that, we worldlings, as he sometimes refers to people who are not following the path, that we are stressed out by the nature of the society that we have created around us. We are suffering from the nature of the society that we have generated and that we sustain by our own behaviour. That's another way in which we are sufferheads, isn't it? And of course, there are all sorts of things that people do in order to get away from stress or to get away from unhappiness. Some of them are benign, like going on a holiday or having a hobby. Some of them are attractive on the outside but lead to trouble, such as alcohol, which is okay up to a point, very little point, and then beyond that it starts, causing trouble, and a little bit further, and it causes destruction. There are lots of things out there that we think, I'll go for that, and that will bring me some peace. It could be sexual exploits, is something that people get obsessed with. If you look at what people get obsessed with, you see that it's actually an attempt to find peace and happiness in life, but choosing the wrong kinds of things which don't last very long. No sooner have I had whatever it is that gives me that pleasure, I'm then thinking about the next one, like that was great, I'd like to do that again, or have that again. And then one becomes a hamster on a treadmill, in which one is just going round and round and round forever, trying to repeat that pleasurable experience, because now it's very strange, isn't it? We're now seeking peace on a treadmill, but there's no such thing as a treadmill to peace. What is happening then is that one is trying to make permanent a state of pleasure which can never be permanent. It's always episodic, impermanent, fleeting, and gone. Every bit of pleasure you've ever had in your life is now gone. Bit of a disturbing thought, isn't it? But when I think of it, then I think, well, the only way I can deal with that is maybe to just get more of it. But you see, that's the trap. That's the trap that the Buddha is talking about, is that the whole world is doing that. The whole world is trying to multiply those things which it seeks as an answer to the need for peace. So it's power, it's pride, it's being famous, it's having a lot of stuff, and so on and so on. Now, if you have 7 billion people that are chasing that with finite resources, it's clear that at some point a solid wall is going to be struck, because there just isn't enough to meet an infinite demand. So some will be getting a lot and some will be getting nothing. And that situation will get worse. So we need to rethink how we envision our need for peace. Because we all do need peace. How do we envision that? So what's the alternative? And, there are lots of people who will tell you, well, if you believe A, B, or C, if you have a strong belief in this or that, then that will be an alternative. Now, the Buddha's not doing that. He's saying that we are the originators of this ceaseless quest, which is bound to fail. So we have to originate something different, not having imposed on us by someone else, but we have to know how to go to look into ourselves and say, how is it that I'm a sufferhead? Don't I have self-awareness? Don't I have self-consciousness? Don't I have the power to look into myself? Don't I have the power to see the workings of my own mind and my own heart and say, okay, well, that hurts, that doesn't. That gives me a deeper kind of peace, not just momentary pleasure, but gives me a deeper peace and understanding. So go in that direction and not in that direction. But to do that successfully, one has to look into oneself. It's not by following advertisements on TV or shopping. You have to take the initiative to do the work on oneself. So all that the Buddha is providing is a set of instructions about how to go about that. He is not providing you with a belief system, and he's not claiming to be a prophet or a deity or anything like that. He says, I'm a human being, I have suffered, I am suffering, and I've looked into that one thing. What is the source of my suffering? He says, I have found something which has worked for me. I'd like to share it with you. And he spent 45 years wandering about, not making any money out of it at all, of course, just to show other people, out of compassion, a different way to peace. So what is that other way? Well, we've already started to understand this. First of all, you see, this is where compassion comes in, because I need to have a little bit of compassion for myself. We often think of compassion as starting with other people. Well, of course, there is no such thing as compassion without a response to the plight of someone else. But maybe that can only really happen if one has compassion for oneself. In other words, you're asking the question, why am I a sufferhead? Right? When you realize, when you begin to see, and I think most of us, at some stage in our life will see that we've made bad decisions, that I thought something was good, but then it turned out to be not so good. Wow, how did I do that? The Buddha says, if you look very closely into this, you'll see that there's a familiar human pattern that we go on repeating, a cycle of suffering, which is called, in Pali, is called samsara, a cycle of regenerating our own inability to move towards peace. Greed. wanting more stuff. Hatred, disliking, rejecting others or other things. Pride, thinking, I'm somehow the most important thing around, which doesn't add up when you think there are 7 billion of us. Because I want to protect myself. So I feel for me to look into myself and find some greed or rejecting or judging of others, for me to find it in myself, I am making myself vulnerable. Anton, it's almost as though I'm saying, well, I'm not a good person then, am I? No, that doesn't have to, see, the Buddha doesn't teach judgment. I don't have to judge myself. I have to be honest about the fact of myself. And it's the same as every other human being, so there's absolutely nothing to be ashamed of. We are, and you can see through our actions, greedy, hateful, prideful creatures. At least that is a dimension that we have. But the Buddha says there's hope because there is another dimension which we tend to ignore, and that is the power of self-awareness, the power of understanding, the power of compassion, the power of free will, and moving from that into a more productive and peaceful direction. If I can develop the power to acknowledge that at this moment I am wanting something and I'm not getting it, so I'm frustrated. What is frustration? It's in my mind. It's not on the carpet, it's not on the roof. The frustration is something I'm clinging to. Because I'm clinging to something I want, I'm not getting it, so I'm feeling frustration. What is frustration? Suffering. Where does it reside? In me. So I'm the sufferhead. It's my suffering. I've got something I don't want. It could be another family member. It could be the work that one is doing. So now I've got something I don't want. What do I feel about that? Resentment. Where's the resentment? Is it in a book? Is it in the garden? No, it's in me. It's my resentment. What is resentment? Suffering. It's not peace. Resentment is not peace, is it? Frustration is not peace. Irritation is not peace. Anger is not peace. Violence is not peace. Trying to get one up on someone else is not peace. Blaming someone else is not peace. There's so many things that are not peace. There are so many things that are not peace. An infinite number of things that are not peace. But there's only one thing that is peace. And that is when the greed, the hatred, the wanting, the not wanting, at least is subdued, possibly even eliminated. And then there's peace. And where does the power to do that lie? Again, does it lie in a book? Does it lie, is it something you grow on a tree? No, it's in me. It's a power that I have, which I'm not using. And that's what makes me a sufferhead. You find the same pattern in all of us. But the difficulty is we tend to throw that at other people. I will say, you are the one that's greedy. You are the one that's hateful. You're the one that's full of pride. For some reason, I either don't acknowledge, or I acknowledge but don't know how to harness the power I have to move towards peace. Now, if all 7 billion people on the planet were doing that, that could make quite a difference, couldn't it? You'd have to let go of a lot of things. We'd have to let go of disliking certain people or disliking a certain group. We'd have to let go of blaming others for the condition that we're in, to let go of wanting more stuff when there isn't enough stuff to go around anyway. So it's like you reach a point where you say, well, why am I doing this? Am I not free? Am I the slave of suffering? Where does it come from? Who is it that is wanting more? It is me. Why am I doing that? Can't I stop? Am I a maniac? So there has to be compassion for yourself. If there's compassion for yourself, the compassion for others will follow. Because then you will see that your suffering is the suffering of everybody. Who is there, even in this room right now, that hasn't suffered loss, grief, disappointment, rejection, fear, anxiety? Is there one person in this room that hasn't suffered those things? I doubt it. And if there is, well, let me say, you've got something ahead of you. So when you have compassion for yourself and you start looking at yourself and you start being honest about the motions of your own mind, then you can say, well, that's not the way I want to go. I want to go in the direction of peace. So let me mentally turn around in that direction. And then you will see that everyone else is in the same boat. That after all, while you are you, you are a human being. And we human beings are very much the same. Very, very much the same. It's a little bit of difference, and we exaggerate the difference between us greatly. And that's when the whole business of rejecting and judging, blaming kicks off. Instead of seeing that we're 99% the same, we focus on the 1% and blow it up into reasons of rejection, hatred, discrimination, war, and the rest of it. How sad. You know? So the Buddha gives us a set of instructions, and the set of instructions are that set of instructions is wisdom. How to go about understanding oneself, seeing where your mind is going, and that is destructive. That way is not destructive, but it is actually harmonious, peaceful, makes sense of everything. And I have the power to switch from that to that, little by little, as my understanding improves. That is wisdom. That is, the wisdom is growing and the ignorance is falling away. So that you see the connection. The wisdom is growing, the ignorance is falling away, kicked off with compassion, feeling compassion for myself. The wisdom is now developing more compassion for others. We are starting now a virtuous circle in which we are learning from each other about wisdom, compassion, and that elusive thing called peace, which we try to fill with all manner of junk. One has to laugh a little bit. I mean, you'd just be crying all the time if you didn't laugh at the human antics. The sad side of it is the amount of destruction that we cause. It's on a phenomenal scale. Has there ever been a creature on this planet that has caused as much destruction as we have? The answer is no. There hasn't been. And yet we're so proud of ourselves, aren't we? It's time to make this step forward in consciousness, where we can develop a kind of a second consciousness which looks down on our own mind and says, what are you doing now? You know, no, don't go that way. Don't feel that. Don't react like that. Instead, try this, because that is definitely going to be fruitful. That is going to be destructive or self-destructive. It's like creating, as I've often said, a second observer. The first observer is just looking at the world and is either wanting stuff or it's rejecting it. What a merry-go-round. That's the first observer. Doesn't know any better. The second observer is the one that's looking at the first observer and saying, what are you up to now? Be careful. I know what you're feeling now. Maybe you better let go of that before it grows any bigger. Or maybe, generosity. Why not feed that a bit more? Feeling gratitude. Gratitude at just being alive. Gratitude at the amazing thing of just being present. What is all of this? What could it be all about? Is it about killing and war? It can't be about that, surely. That'd be a desperate vision of human life, wouldn't it? That we're all here to make each other miserable? That can't be it. So the wisdom is in knowing how to harness the power of inner attention and knowledge of the workings of the first observer, of the ordinary self. That's wisdom. As that develops, the compassion for oneself and for others is developing, and you're moving towards peace. Or let's say more peace than you had previously. So the three things, wisdom, compassion, and peace, are intimately connected. And that's what the whole of the Buddha's teaching is about. It's not about anything else. He's not a philosopher or a psychologist or anything of the kind. He's just a deeply compassionate human being who devoted himself only to one thing. How can we human beings be more peaceful? The answer lies in yourself and knowing how to look into yourself honestly and without judgment and decide, I'm going a different way. From now on, I'm going a different way.
New Buddha Way lets go of East and West and starts afresh in the life we have now. For more information, visit www.newbuddhaway.org.